Okay. So can you introduce yourself?
So I'm Nancy Foss, and I have lived here in Napa for about 25 years. I moved here from San Francisco, and the beautiful Napa Valley drew us up here. We were coming up from San Francisco on the weekends and then realized that we wanted to live here. So we bought a home and remodeled it and lived in Napa then for about 25 years.
Okay. So we're gonna talk about your experience with the fires.
Okay.
So have you suffered any loss from the fires?
So the immediate and obvious loss was the total destruction of our house, which was completely unexpected. Even though we left knowing that things were burning, we didn't expect it to happen to us, that it would come all the way down to our house. So the initial loss was the tremendous loss of our beautiful home and our beautiful lot. Our life was surrounded, that house was our life. We had family and friends, and we entertained a lot. So it was like a sanctuary for us. So when I went up there a few days later to see what happened and what was left, I didn't cry. I was so overwhelmed that it was more of a spectacle to me. It was like, how in the world did this happen? And I think that's probably one of the things that stays with me now, is just the image of what was really going on that night. The immense heat, the fire everywhere. Everything was on fire. After it was safe to go into the neighborhoods and see not just my neighborhood, but walking through the streets, to realize that what happened to my house was going on simultaneously in, maybe 60, 70 houses at the same time. So this idea of this firestorm that was so hot and so destructive is something I'm having a hard time visualizing. Yeah. So I have this ongoing vision of standing inside my house, watching everything on fire, and that's really hard to get my head around.
Yeah. So can you tell us exactly what happened during the night of the fires, if you checked the evacuation?
So we saw this fire glow in the hills, but it was pretty far away. And spoke with my friend Lisa, and she said she was going to leave. She felt like it was enough of a danger. So Joe and I, my husband and I, took a few possessions in the car, including the cat and our passports, very little, just one bag, one canvas bag, because we really looked at each other and thought, well, it's not going to come down here, but we should leave. And actually, as we were leaving, the police were coming down the street with a bullhorn saying, everybody out. So it was the right thing to do at the right time. So we left and went to our daughter's house across the valley, and she has a clear view across the valley back up to this neighborhood. So we stood in her backyard that night and watched the fire come down the hill. We couldn't see our house specifically, but we could see the movement through the hills. So that was pretty scary. And then the next morning I received the message and the photograph from my friend of my house on fire. And that's when I knew that it had struck our home. And so we stayed with our daughter for 3 or 4 days, and then we were allowed to go back up to see our home sites one by one. And the State Patrol and the Napa police were escorting everybody up. And so I rode in the back of a police car to my home, and we drove up the driveway, and it was just complete and utter destruction. There was nothing left. A few pieces of artwork that we had outside, but it was unbelievable, just a complete devastation. So I had my 20 minutes that was allowed to go through. It was still too hot to go through anything, to look for anything. So I just took a lot of pictures and videos and got back in the back of a police car and went back. And then went back to our daughter's house and asked my husband if he wanted to see the pictures, and he wasn't ready to see them. But my daughter and her husband did. And I also have 2 grandchildren who live there, and they were not ready to see them yet. So everybody sort of processed it a little different. I wanted to see it right away. So a lot of what you have to do, which I didn't realize, is go through a lot of paperwork right away. So you have to contact your insurance company. In the case of my insurance company, they were very cooperative. They wrote me a big check right then and there to help with immediate expenses, since we had lost everything. I mean, clothes, underwear, you know, we needed everything. Then I had to go to the county offices of Napa to report that we had lost our home. They had to change some paperwork. They had to revalue the lot. Now we didn't have a beautiful home and a beautiful lot. It wasn't going to be worth as much. So all that kind of stuff you have to do quickly because everybody else is doing it too. Then of course it was finding a place to stay longer. We didn't want to burden our daughter, so we looked for a place to stay, and a friend of mine has a home here who is very rarely here, only on the weekends. So she said, just move in, which was a godsend. So we did. So that gave us a place to be and you know, start again working with all the paperwork and all the business aspects of losing your house. There's just a lot to do. Then we had to buy things. Even though we didn't have our permanent place here yet, we still needed clothes, food, just really, we had nothing. So you go from having this, you know, incredible place with a lot of stuff to nothing. So I went to Target, and I was there with everybody else I knew. They were all in there, and we were buying underwear and jeans and t-shirts and just basic stuff. So that was the first few steps. Then we had, you know, now that we had a place to live, we could sort of sort through what do we really want to do. We went back to our lot. My husband then was ready to see the destruction. We were able to go through and sift through things. Was there anything left? I do have a picture, and I can give it to you, of some jewelry that my mother had given me that I'd forgotten about that actually made it. But basically there was nothing. There was, I mean, they actually gave you a sifter, and you could sift through all the ashes, see if any little things came up. Nothing. So that again was part of this thing I'm going through, is how could the fire have been that hot and been that destructive that there is nothing left. No furniture, no fabric, no shades, no tile, no anything recognizable. That was really mind-blowing. So after we kind of realized there was nothing left, a friend of mine who was our architect wanted to come up because he had rebuilt the house for us originally. So he came up with a builder, and he said, Nancy, I have the plans from before. My builder is ready to go. Let's do this. Let's just rebuild your house. We can do it right now. I can go to the county. I can get the permits. He really wanted to do it. And Joe and I just sat there and looked at each other, and we were like, I just don't know if we can do this, you know. And so we talked about it, and then we just said, Jeff, we're not going to do it. It's just too hard. My husband was ill and older, and he just was like, I just can't do this. So it was hard, because I knew our architect had invested a lot in the house emotionally when he rebuilt it for us, and really wanted to do it again. And so, but it was the right thing for us to do. So we then started the process of contacting the government to come. FEMA is the agency to come and clear the lot. And they bring in, you know, bulldozers and all kinds of heavy-duty equipment. And you sit there and watch them just claw your house away. They just have to clear the lot. So we befriended the crew. They were actually really nice. And all of these workers, all these firemen, all these FEMA workers, they come from all over the country. So, you know, there's all these disasters happening everywhere, and so these crews are sent everywhere. So none of these guys were from Napa. They were from way far away. So it was probably a 2-week process for them to literally scrape the lot clean, take everything away in a big dumpster, you know. And then we ended up with just this lot. So then you look at that and you go, okay, well, there was a beautiful house there, and it's, you know, really hard. You start to be afraid that you're not going to remember, because we also lost all our photographs, except for what I had taken, what was in the cloud, but all our photos were gone. So you start to worry that you're not going to remember. That's really hard. So they cleared the lot. We let it sit there. Again, people like us, everyone was different. We're going to rebuild, we're not going to rebuild. We're going to sell the lot, we're going to build exactly what we had, we're going to build a whole new house. Everybody's story was different. But we realized right away that we didn't want to rebuild. We waited probably 6 months, and then we put our lot on the market. So it was a beautiful lot, and it was still green. I mean, the areas that hadn't burned still looked pretty nice, so we put a for sale sign on it. We worked with a realtor, and it sold in about a week. So somebody now owns our lot, and hopefully they'll build a beautiful house on it. Well, what I'm hearing is that it was sparked by electrical lines owned by PG&E that were compromised because of the wind that was causing, you know, all this brush and everything to catch on fire. So I would assume, but I don't know, that yes, maybe a line fell down and caught some brush on fire, and and then with the wind it just took off. That's my understanding now.
Okay. And do you believe that global warming has something to do with the
Yes, I do,
fires?
definitely. I think there's a cycle anyway, in spite of global warming. Things burn on a regular basis. And I know there are theories that you should just let things burn. That's the way nature intended it. But because we're always putting fires out, stuff grows more, and there's more fuel to burn. So there's a lot of different philosophies. But yes, California's been in a horrible drought, and you know, we live on a golf course. It's irrigated, it's green, it's beautiful, but we can look up in the hills and see how dry it is, and we know that it is. So yeah, it was probably going to happen. It had happened before, but because we'd had several years of drought, it was pretty inevitable. So I think it was a series, you know, it was the drought, it was the crazy winds, and then it was just this unfortunate accident, I think, that a line blew down, possibly, and sparked the fire. So.
Okay. And do you think that realizing that global warming has something to do, did it change your mind on that subject, or?
I was always a believer in global warming. I don't know, I'm worried that we're past the point of fixing it, and that really worries me. I don't want to go through this again, and I think it's possible that we can and will, and that's from an emotional and a psychological standpoint, it's horrifying. But I see things happening all over the world. You know, Sweden's on fire, and Canada's on fire right now, and places that normally don't have that kind of weather are experiencing just crazy things. So yes, I believe in global warming, and I think we have a whole lot to do with it. I also think part of it is, you know, it is just a natural cycle, but we've definitely made it worse. So.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.